Hello. So hopefully you've already done the other parts of the Flex Day assignment so far, which is going through a little bit of the definition of science fiction as well as some examples from the various websites that I linked. These are further notes that usually I make people write in their notebooks, but I've realized you don't really need to. But I do want to make sure you listen to these and mentally prepare yourself, so I'm going to have you answer the questions on the Flex Day doc in lieu of taking notes in your notebook. So the first mini topic to cover are the thematic issues in science fiction, which was on a little bit of the website that I linked you to, but just in general, things to keep in mind. Science fiction usually deals with, obviously, scientific advancements, so how the characters interact with these advancements and how they influence the characters' actions. Next, what sort of societal issues are similar or different? We get less of that in 2001 just because there's so few characters once we get to those sections of the film, or so few named characters really, but thinking about that might also be helpful. More helpful is how do humans fit into the society that is built in the future, and what is their thought process like? How do they interact with the technology that has become so prevalent in the society depicted in the film or the book or whatever, but in our case it'll be the film. And then finally, science fiction usually either has a positive tone and is more of a hope for the future, or a more negative tone and it's some kind of warning about what might happen, things to keep an eye out for. So trying to determine that positive versus negative outlook on the future will also be relevant. In 2001, there are going to be not subtitles. They're kind of like chapter headings, essentially. It'll be a black screen, and there'll be a title of the section of the film. And there's technically 3 sections of the film. It'll start with the dawn of man, which is set way before the Common Era. So like way BC, before humans existed. And then that section of the film has 2 chunks. It's got the dawn of man and then switches to still being the dawn of man, but the dawn of man in the age of technology, and it's set in presumably the year 2001, in space above the moon. And that's when we'll get into the more high-tech sort of scenarios. So that's part 1. That's where the science fiction will show up in the second half of the Dawn of Man. And then the Jupiter mission, which is set just a few months after that. And again, it's people on a spaceship heading to Jupiter, and you'll find out why. But that'll be the part that's more science fiction-y. And then the last section of the film is called Beyond the Infinite, and that is essentially beyond space and time. And we'll get to that part. But the other topic I wanted to cover was dystopia, because the Jupiter mission could technically be considered dystopian. It's a twist on it a bit, but it fits a lot of the dystopian elements that are traditionally considered for that sort of subgenre of science fiction. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, and that wasn't on the website or any other good websites that I found, so I was just going to introduce it via video. Dystopias, I think most people are familiar with these because they're so common nowadays. If you studied Lord of the Flies freshman year, a lot of the English teachers end up introducing dystopia at that point, or at least the basics of it. So just so you have the definition, it's any futuristic setting that is meant to criticize or bring sort of awareness to an aspect of our contemporary society, but again, it's set in the future. I've got some examples there. 1984 is probably the best one. Certain episodes of The Twilight Zone are dystopian. The Hunger Games, technically dystopian, etc. But the important elements, there's actually 5 because I combined a couple of them. But there are 5 main elements of the dystopian genre that you need to be aware of. The first is that there's always something controlling society. And in our film, it's going to be technology. Usually in science fiction, it's either technology or corporation or the government. But in ours, it's technology. Number 2, it has to physically fit the definition of a dystopia, which means it has to project the appearance of being an ideal society and everything is perfect and wonderful and easy. But there are some major issues underlying that sort of mask of perspection. So keep an eye out for that, especially once we get to, again, the Jupiter mission portion of the film. And then the other 3 elements are, number 3, the controlling entity. Again, in our case, technology, maintains control by manipulating information or language. So that's going to be a thematic thread, is just the idea of language and communication and what the characters have control over versus what is being sort of, forced upon them. So that's one interesting thing that if you want to jot that down in your notebook to keep an eye out for it in the film, might be useful. Usually in dystopias, nature is devalued or not trusted by the society. That's a little bit different in ours because there's not physical nature because they're in space, but threw it on there anyway. And then number 5, conformity is valued and individuality is frowned upon. So keeping in mind how our protagonist in the Jupiter mission, which is really the best part of the film, how he either conforms or maintains his individuality. The dystopian hero, again, traditionally in the genre, they are the one that realizes something is wrong with society. They try to escape. They question the existing social, political, technological systems, and they also usually have some sort of flaw that prevents them from escaping or making real change. And we'll see how our protagonist fits or does not fit into this particular categorization. You'll get to decide for yourself whether you think he qualifies or not. And then finally, thematic issues in dystopias. The big ones are going to be control, power, and the way that the heroes or protagonists, if you don't want to call them heroes, respond to pressure and what their flaws are as well. So those are going to be the big issues, the heavy hitters, as it were. So the last thing I wanted to mention is we're going to watch this movie over the next 2 weeks. We've got a break for Thanksgiving. We definitely won't finish it in the 4 days that we have before Thanksgiving, which is fine. So bring your notebooks, be prepared to take your last set of observational inferential notes. Remember, this is our 5th and final movie of the semester. This is your last chance to take your notes and write a good paper for your portfolio. And I also just wanted to let you know that there's going to be more film responses than you're probably used to. They won't be long. They won't all be half-pagers. But this film is notoriously difficult to understand for a lot of people, and that's what frustrates them. So I'm going to kind of give you questions that'll give you some form of direction as to why the film might be set up the way it is or why it includes the elements it does. And I think the best way to get you to think about those is to give you a couple questions each day to focus on. So I might give you the questions at the beginning of class and have you look for those things, or we might watch the clips or the scenes, and then I'll give you the questions to reflect on. It kind of depends on the scenes for the day, but just be aware of you're going to have a running list, and I'll number the questions, so you'll just want to keep them in your notebook. And it's up to you whether you want to insert them into your actual observational notes, or if you want to flip a couple pages in your notebook and start your questions on a new page so that they're all together. That'll be your choice, but just letting you know that that'll be a thing we'll be doing. And it's going to be fun. I love 2001. It's an amazing movie. You just gotta take it for what it is, which is a beautiful piece of art. Not necessarily a commercial drama, as some of our other films have been. It requires a little bit of critical thinking, but it'll be fun. So looking forward to seeing you on Thursday. Thanks.